2022 was a fantastic year of field herping, full of some really memorable highlights. The last episode served as more of just a highlight reel with a lot of cool clips of the cool animals we saw, but in this episode I'm going to go a little bit more in depth into what makes the best finds of the year for me by doing a top 10 list. Starting off at number 10, we have the humble wood frog. Now, of course, in some places wood frogs are so common they are hard to avoid, but where I live at the southern extent of their range, they're a pretty good find. In fact, they are such a good find that this was the first time I ever found this species in my home county where I grew up. So having spent so many years here finding reptiles and amphibians, this is without a doubt one of the places that I have herped the hardest over the years. So any species that I can add to the list of reptiles and amphibians that live here is a pretty big deal to me. I found this guy super late in the activity period for wood frogs, so I'm really looking forward to trying to figure out this population a little bit better in early 2023. Number 9 on this list was actually a lifer for me and Steven. This was our first rosy boa that we uncovered on our trip to Southern California with my dad. While rosy boas aren't particularly rare, they are a very good find, and they're just one of those species that is so iconic and is just one of the big draws to the Southwest for a lot of herpers, including myself. This was just such a unique snake and so different than anything I had ever found in the wild, really. So just a special find all around, and one of many highlights from a really good trip exploring a part of the country that was completely new to me, which is really fun and one of my favorite parts about herping, just going to new places and seeing what you can find. No part of making this list was easy, but putting this find at number 8 was pretty tough to do.
Dude! What? Oh my god!
Y'all know I love coachwhips in general, but this snake was completely unexpected, flipped on a day that we were kind of worried was going to be a bust because it was just so cool and wouldn't stop raining. But on top of that, it was just a stunning snake. It was gigantic, the scenery was awesome with the low clouds and the misty rain, and on top of that, it was at a spot I had not seen a coachwhip in the Georgia Piedmont, where they are incredibly rare. So really a stacked find. I think most years I could have easily put this snake in my top 5, but at the end of the day, 2022 was pretty crazy when it comes to highlights, even if overall it was a little bit slower than I was hoping. The next snake is another one that I just absolutely had to put on this list because it was a species that I've wanted to see for a long time as a self-proclaimed Lamprepeltis nut.
Sonata!
The California mountain king snake group is one of the last major groups of Lamprepeltis in the US that I had yet to really get my feet wet with or get into habitat and search for it. In fact, I had never even been in range of this species before this trip. It took a lot of trial and error, and I think we actually ended up finding this guy on the last full day of the trip, and it was our main target for the trip, the whole reason we came to California. The weather was definitely working against us for a lot of the California trips, so even though we didn't really find anything crazy or in crazy places, it was just nice to finally make that trip happen and actually get our 2 main targets, being the mountain king and a rosy boa. My dad and I had been trying to make this trip for years now, and we had actually planned to do it in 2020, but then COVID happened, so that pushed it back again, and it was just a great feeling to finally make the California trip happen in 2022, and this snake right here will always remind me of that. So huge find, a huge moment for me.
Oh my god!
The cooler lid flip. Y'all knew it was coming. When an unsuspecting igloo cooler lid produced this incredible pair of pale milk snakes in our second day of looking for them in Wyoming, I knew this was going to be one of the highlights of the year. Just flipping milk snakes strikes some sort of incredible happiness reserve in my brain. And being able to capture that moment on film and share it with you guys is just, it's one of my favorite things about what we do here on this channel. And this pair was no exception. Fantastic snakes, fantastic flip, and just a great trip overall. We ended up finding, I think, 5 of these snakes in Wyoming in 2 days. But I definitely think this double flip was my favorite milk snake find of the year and of that trip. Number 5. Y'all knew there had to be an Alterna on this list somewhere, and it has to be this one. This incredible Blair's face gray-banded king snake came from one of the toughest places to find this species in their range in the United States, and that so happens to be a place that myself and Steven have spent a lot of time over the years. All Alterna are special, but the Alterna rush that me and the boys got after finding this snake was unlike anything that I experienced this summer. It was definitely the highlight of the summer months, and I'm not exaggerating when I say hundreds of hours, man-hours, went into finding this snake between myself and Steven. Alright, now we're on the home stretch. These last 4 finds, I think, are finds that characterize my season. Number 4 was kind of one of those herping experiences that I've heard about people having, but I'd never really had myself before until now. It was a windy and cold spring day in North Florida, and I had just stepped out of the car to start my herping expedition for the day, and I heard this really weird squeaking sound that sounded like maybe a mouse that was in distress. I followed my ears to a brush pile where I saw this huge corn snake wrapped around a rat. Now, any sort of feeding observation for me is significant, but to get to see this kind of from start to finish with the most ridiculous interruption imaginable, and it was so cold and windy the entire time that I was second guessing whether or not there would even be snakes out until we found this. So Caitlin and I are sitting there just digesting the entire situation when she gets really excited and starts tapping on my shoulder and pointing. And I look up to see a king snake crawling out of the same pile of palm fronds, right behind where the corn snake is eating a rat. Not even maybe 2 feet away. Which you can see here just how close the corn snake is. It's not a great look at both of them, but you can see just how close together they are. My 100mm lens allowed me to take much better photos than video, and you can see these here. The king snake was actually really nice, but this was the best look we got in. And soon after taking these photos, we ended up leaving and giving them their space because the last thing we wanted to happen was to disturb the predation event of the corn snake or potentially interrupt the king snake if he wanted to go try to eat the corn or the rat. Keep in mind, we had also been out of the car for about 5 minutes, so we knew we had the whole day ahead of us to potentially find more snakes. It was a short and sweet encounter, but definitely one of the vibrant highlights of my season.
And here's a shed.
Oh, I do see him.
Here's a shed right here.
We're just surrounded by rattlesnakes above our heads. This is so ridiculous. Look at this.
Number 3 in the countdown has to go to baby rattlesnakes in the trees. One of my favorite things to do every fall or late summer is to try to see newborn timber rattlesnakes and their mothers. And on a very overcast and wet September day, Richard and I accomplished just that in one of the most unexpected ways possible. Upon approaching an area where we knew a gravid female rattlesnake had been hanging out, we started noticing that the trees around the log where we were expecting to see the snakes basking were covered in sheds and baby rattlesnakes. I had seen timber rattlesnakes off the ground before, and I had even seen baby timber rattlesnakes off the ground before, but to see 9 baby timber rattlesnakes this day, most of which were many feet off the ground and several of which were over our heads, it was just such a wild experience, and they were in such great places for photos. I think I got some fantastic shots that day, some of my favorite of the year. It's just ridiculous all around as a naturalist and someone who appreciates seeing these animals in habitat and seeing behavior. It just doesn't get much better than this. And then it does get better. My second favorite find of the year was this incredible eastern king snake, which was actually found only maybe 30 or 45 minutes after the corn snake eating the rat encounter. This incredible pattern anomaly is what is known as a Mosaic king snake, which is a naturally occurring morph, and it does tend to be fairly common in some areas, but you definitely have to sift through a ton of king snakes to finally come across one of these aberrancies in the wild. I knew that if I found enough wild king snakes, eventually I would find a weird one, so I wasn't necessarily targeting a Mosaic king snake this day, but it was always in the back of my mind, and it's been in the back of my mind for years, so for that dream to finally become reality it was unbelievable. So what could possibly be better than finding something that you've been looking for years? I think the only correct answer to that question is finding something that you didn't even know existed, which is exactly what happened when Caitlin and myself cruised up on this incredible solid black canebrake rattlesnake on a random road in Alabama that I had never even been to prior to this.
Oh my God. Oh my god! That is the craziest snake I have ever seen in my life. Why is it black?
This find brought about just such an incredible release of emotion and excitement to see something so unexpected and so incredible at the same time. We found this snake at the end of a very rough trip where we didn't see hardly any of our targets and barely any snakes at all. And just to end such an otherwise slow trip with something so ridiculous and incredible, it's the best thing you could ask for.
Like, that is, I don't even have words. I am struggling to find words to describe this animal.
So to provide some context into why this animal is not only very cool and very cool looking, but it's also rare, here is an example of what a normal timber rattlesnake or canebrake rattlesnake from this part of Alabama looks like. Of course, timber rattlesnakes in general are variable throughout their range, but within any given area that contains a normal spectrum on which most of the timbers you're going to find will fall. And if you're in the Appalachian Mountains, there is a very large section of the timber rattlesnakes range where it is common to see dark timber rattlesnakes. For example, here is a quote-unquote black-faced timber rattlesnake. This is not a canebrake. This is a high-elevation montane timber rattlesnake from Georgia. Definitely a little bit closer than the canebrake in the last photo I showed, but still night and day compared to this anomaly. So even to find a snake like the one I just showed from Georgia in an actual high elevation timber rattlesnake habitat, to find a snake that looks anything like that in Alabama would be pretty weird. But to find a snake that's just solid black, like something you would expect to see in Pennsylvania or New York, in Alabama, well within the range of what would have historically been known as the canebrake rattlesnake, which is basically the lowland variant of the timber, it's unheard of.
All right. Retreats angrily.
Alright everyone, well I hope you enjoyed my countdown of my top favorite finds in 2022. There's definitely some runner-ups that are missing from this list and I wish I had space for, but I mean, doing a top 12 or something is not as satisfying. You kind of have to limit it to the top 10. So let me know what you guys thought. Was there something that you think I left off the list? Let me know if I was majorly disrespecting any of my finds this year by not mentioning them. I hope everyone's having a good holiday season so far. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next episode, which may or may not be filmed in 2022 or 2023. Just not sure yet. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.